Part 1. An Introduction.
Do the impossible, see the invisible. Row, row, fight the power. Touch the untouchable, break the unbreakable. Row, row, fight the power.
In 2008, I quit my job, traveled the world, and trained martial arts. This was never my plan, but like many great things in life, things work out better when you don't plan for it. You see, when I quit my job and got on the road, I had no idea what I was doing or what was going to happen. No map, no GPS, and no working radio. It broke the first night. But that's what made it memorable. That's why it's called an adventure, not a plan. People love goals and plans. Well, I don't know if we really love goals and plans. We're told to love goals and plans, even if it kills us. And I particularly didn't feel like dying, so I kissed it all goodbye. This life on autopilot just wasn't working for me. My reason for living wasn't to be the best robot. Part 2. To each their own. Do you know what to each their own means? It means we all have rights to our own preferences. It's actually an old Latin term, sum cuique. To many of us, our preferences are a set of defaults that have been handed down to us. We never chose them. Nonetheless, we fight for them. And when we fight for our limitations, we keep them. But our preferences were never meant to be a set of defaults. The synonym for preference is choice. Just as flowers in a garden, we were supposed to pick our favorites. So I picked mine. I'd like to believe I have some modicum of freedom in my life, where I can do the things I feel like doing when I feel like doing them. Goals and plans predetermine the whole thing. Where's the fun in predeterminism? As a side note, in predeterminism, there is no you, not a you in the common way you think of yourself. You're a pawn, compelled by fate. And when you're told of your goals, rather than resist, you double your efforts to be successful, to be rich, to be famous, to be whatever you think you're supposed to be. Suppose is the belief that things are predetermined. Doing what you think you're supposed to requires no consciousness. You're a bot. But I want to do what I want. We fear robots will take our jobs, but they already have. We are the robots. We have removed humanity from our roles, and what is left are flesh and blood machines, fulfilling the roles actual humans once did. Even the term robot doesn't mean what we think it means. It's an old Slavonic word that means slave. We are slaves to our roles. The reason this is what we call machines and not human slaves is that human slaves can still escape. They can revolt, though there will be consequences. And in the arc of history, humans have been able to free themselves. Machines have not. Machines wouldn't even know to do that. That's why machines make for the best robots, best slaves. But if we forget that we can escape our roles, then we too are robot slaves. If it does not occur to us, then we are not free to do it. We think the ultimate reward for this comedy of errors is that our souls will be compensated. But what soul does a chatbot or a real estate calculator have? Did all my lost toys from childhood end up in heaven as well? You tell a toy train that if it goes from point A to B, it can sit on the mantle. Then you set the tracks from A to B and turn the train on and have it fulfill its role. Then you place the train on the mantle. What happened? Nothing for the train, because the train has no self-determinism and no self-awareness. One might say that's the train and we are people. But a biological machine that is predetermined has no soul. So what's the point? This is why we say our roles are soul-sucking. But I wanted my soul back. Or maybe back isn't the right word. Maybe I just wanted to have a soul of my own. Part 3. Default Roles.
Do the impossible, see the invisible. Row, row, fight the power, touch the untouchable, break the unbreakable. Row, row, fight the power.
I used to be a successful loan officer, among many other roles. Before that, I was a successful financial advisor, all for the same company. I transferred to whatever department was making the most money. This was before the financial crisis. I was a bloodsucker, but that's how we define success, by making lots of money for our companies. Billionaire CEOs now have fan clubs, give talks like preachers, and write best-selling books. Not best-selling business books, but books the mainstream gobble up while kicking aside Pulitzer Prize-winning fiction. We have reality shows about poor people and their debt collectors. Advertisements are cool and trendy. And we hate on independent content creators like YouTubers and podcasters and love HBO and Disney. We're fans of brands and enemies of each other. And CEOs and dictators are our heroes. I mean, we're pretty fucked up. I was fucked up. I was mixed up. I wasn't living my own life. I was a cartoon. But after the 80s, we all became cartoons. We can all get sucked into stereotypical roles on bad faith. This is Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir's argument. In bad faith, human beings, under the spell of social forces, give up their innate freedoms to adopt inauthentic values. Lots of times, we find stereotypes to be true and find living, breathing cliches. I was basic. All I did was build rapport, network, and small talk. I was a series of 50 funny catchphrases playing on random shuffle. And at work, I was always closing. I was even taught a script that was like a choose your own adventure. If they do this, I do this. If they do that, I overcome that objection with this. All ending with the close. My bosses even told me I was like a machine. But that's supposed to be some sort of compliment. But it's a compliment like being told you're a paperweight is a compliment. It's fucked up, but we love it. We love being complimented as if we were furniture. Think about this. Are stereotypes and cliches based on real people? Or are real people assuming the roles of stereotypes and cliches? And how can you tell? You can't. To the observer, it'll look the same. Only the person living the bad role can know, but only if they can muster some self-awareness. That's the struggle. You might know someone who took a new job, or perhaps they had a midlife crisis. Whatever the event, now they've become a caricature. Did the job, or going to nightclubs every night to find their youth again, change them? Or did they assume a role? Someone takes a personality test, and they get a result. They're an introvert. Now all of a sudden, they're quieter than before. Did they take on a role? How about a guy before and after he joins a fraternity? Or a person's demeanor after plastic surgery? How come some people, after they start training a Chinese martial art, begin to sound like a fortune cookie? Especially when there is no part of their training that's about sounding like a fortune cookie. You go on a diet, but begin to shame yourself. Is that part of the diet, or you just think it's a part of the diet? Is Kim Kardashian ever Kim Kardashian, or is she always a cartoon character? And does she know herself from the cartoon? Do we even know her from the cartoon? As a child, when someone told you were smart, that you were special, did that change you? If it were just an observation, what was being described wouldn't need to change, or it would alter what was being described. But we change. We assume the role. So what are we doing? If we were already smart and special, why do we need to act smarter and more special? Life imitates art imitating life. The most common question when you meet someone new, besides their name, is to ask what they do. I argue that asking for the name is out of obligation. The name usually isn't that important for the person asking. It'll be gone in a few seconds anyway. The real information people want is the role. What role do they play? We forget names, but we remember what people do. What was your wife's name again? We've come to value the role, but not the individual. In knowing their role, we believe we know who they are, even though the name is a signifier of who they are as an individual. When we talk about someone, we might say, she's like that because she's a lawyer, or he's like that because he's an artist. The role explains everything. You know how moms are. You can't even explain why you have a certain interest without explaining it with a role. No longer people, we believe we are our roles. We own our roles, even our faux preferences. I'm really into fill in the blank because of some fill in the blank role you think you're supposed to play. You can't just be into or not into something because that's your preference. Your role is the explanation of your preference. It's because I'm a Gemini. I'm not being rude. I'm just type A. You know how us Asians are. Why do you know so much about food? Oh, because I'm a foodie. You can't just have an interest because that's what you're interested in. It has to be an extension of your role. If I like or read about history just because, I'm a weirdo. But if I'm a history student, a history teacher, or just call myself a history buff, then it's totally fine. If I know about Filipino culture and I'm not Filipino, and I know about it just because I was curious, then it's strange. But if I say I'm the boyfriend of a Filipina, or my role was as the non-Filipino friend growing up around Filipinos, then it's pretty cool. But why isn't it cool just to know stuff? Just as saying, I don't like cheese. It's not my thing. It's not your preference. So what are they going to say? But you know what makes people mad? I hate cheese. Cheese is disgusting. You're offending millions of cheese lovers. You're no longer respecting to each their own. You're no longer speaking for yourself, but for everyone else, and making a claim that their preferences are wrong. But that's what we tend to do, and that's why we tend to piss each other off. Some people mistake this for being authoritarian or thought policing. That's too charitable, because at least that means we have some preference we're forcing on others. Unfortunately, what's probably happening is we have some default programming and assume it's a universal default, and are mortified to find that our default might not be universal. What? We all aren't programmed the same way? You don't want to think your programming is off, that you're a broken robot. So you reframe it to make it seem like it's everyone else who is wrong, who is broken. But my question is, rather than being horrified that you're programmed differently from others, that we are not all the same, why not just be horrified that we are all slaves to our programming? I'm not horrified by what horrifies people. I'm horrified by people. This might be too meta, but as a human who can think his own thoughts, I can do that. So can you. We hate on meta, but that's horrifying. That's literally hating on being a non-robot, also known as a human. Or, to state it simply, there's a difference between a human being and being human. Just as there is a difference between an animal and a rational animal. It's not something that is given, it's something that is earned. Part 4. You are not a label. We are all actors, but actors with Alzheimer's who have forgotten their real selves. No different from a lawnmower cutting grass in an endless field, having lost its driver a long time ago. A runaway role. A role is performative, and we have all become committed performance artists, never breaking character. Like a pro wrestler who believes their own gimmick, never breaking kayfabe. It's why we often have to ask, do you really believe that? Because we know they don't. They just won't break character. It takes effort to think, and thinking is not automatic. We can slide into a role just as quickly as we can slide into a sofa. Neuroscientists call it zombie routines. We can develop a new mindless habit within seconds. It's why we can adapt to new devices so quickly, and why neuroscientists are used in designing consumer products to make us shopping robots. Roles are like comfortable clothing. We don't even know we have them on unless we pay close attention. Just as an alcoholic on a long sobriety run who takes a drink again, it will feel natural. I slid into a role and it felt natural. I was cashing in and helping no one. What I told myself was that I was a good person and I was helping others. That's what I grew up wanting. As if I were in a drunken stupor, somewhere I forgot. I wanted a life worth living and liberation in life. Part 5. My office space moment.
Do the impossible, see the invisible. Row, row, fight the power, touch the untouchable, break the unbreakable. Row, row, fight the power.
No great inciting moment shattered my illusion. Nothing like Neo in the Matrix. Just one day at my desk, while looking at a spreadsheet, it occurred to me, I should quit my job. Right then and there, I wrote a resignation letter. My employers asked if I had been recruited by another company. I told them I hadn't. I was just going to drive around the country. Then I got a call from HR. They wanted to know if I was having a breakdown, if I needed crisis support from the company. From their limited perspective, why would someone walk away with money on the table unless there was another table with more money? Don't get me wrong, money is cool, but what makes it cool is that it's supposed to give me freedom. The whole point is freedom, not money itself. It's as if I was mistaking the water pitcher for the water. What matters is the water, and I was collecting pitchers and dying of thirst. The young woman who was doing my exit interview asked, "Is this some sort of midlife thing?" But I was only in my 20s. Was this already my midlife? Maybe a stressful, meaningless life kills everyone who lives it, in which case your 20s is the new middle. I told her I was doing it because I felt like it. I have freedom, goddammit. I remember she paused for a moment, kind of to ask herself if she could do the same thing. She slipped out of her role. The day after my last day of work, I took my car for a tune-up. When the job was done, I ate lunch and then threw some clothes in a bag. Then I saw all my martial arts gis. Gi means uniform. And so I thought to myself, well, just in case, and threw them in another bag. Then I got in my car and drove. I didn't know where, I didn't know for how long. In hindsight, this could have gone terribly wrong. This was January. I hit several blizzards, was snowed in, trapped in my car, almost ran out of gas and water in the middle of nowhere. A lot of bad things almost happened, but they didn't. It didn't take me long to realize, hey, I'm gonna be alright. Miyamoto Musashi said, "Do not regret what is done." And after some practice, it becomes easier to move on from what is done into what has not yet been done, to look forward rather than regret. My first night on the road, I wrote this in my journal. Life is a journey with no destination, so make sure there are no ordinary moments. Part 6. Wu Wei, the philosophy of spontaneity. I drove, and when I got tired, I would rest. If there happened to be some interesting place to train or eat, I'd go there. If I liked it, I stayed a few more nights. If I didn't, I moved on. I was free from deadlines, so I did what I wanted. I wrote this in my journal. I saw what was happening, not only to me, but to everyone else I knew, and I thought better of it. Before I die, I want to live. End quote. I zigzagged through America. No destination. My only requirement was to live, and even came to terms if that didn't work out. This is the essence of Wu Wei, the philosophy of spontaneity. We normally end up in the same ruts and echo chambers, having our biases confirmed. You can meet a rocket scientist and eventually end up talking to them about the same things you always talk about. We're so happy with what we already know that we ignore all the exciting new avenues to be explored. We read books that confirm our beliefs. People recommend books that reiterate thoughts we already have. You have to read this book. It talks about everything you already talk about. This isn't far off from how books or TV shows, and now podcasts, are recommended to people. Why don't we be honest when we recommend something? You would love this. It's an echo chamber. So we end up with the same lessons and thoughts we're used to. Even in a new environment, we will force it to be whatever we're familiar with. Force everything into our default domains. When we hear a long explanation, what do? We say something like, so you're basically saying, and then convert it to something we already know. So that way, we don't have to learn this new thing. This is why McDonald's is the most popular restaurant for tourists. In lab tests, when people eat something and are told it's something different from what it is, it affects their perception of taste. Expectations alter reality. This doesn't only work with our taste buds, it works with all of our senses. We are accustomed to seeing things not as they are, but how we think they should be. Then we never see reality, and reality and its inhabitants deserve to be seen as they are without our judgments. That's my preference. Let's see what I see. If I unfocus my gaze and take my eyes off the prize, what other things will I see? How broad will my view be? How much more of the world will I be able to experience? Rather than specific, like how will being a fill in the blank make me happy, how about a more open-ended search? Such as, how can I flourish? You can only do this by casting the widest net possible, or no net at all. How broad are your horizons? People don't Google what is the healthiest diet. They Google why veganism is the best diet. We tell the universe the answers we want to hear. But can we just be open-ended? When I talk about my non-linear trip and the random towns I visited, it still confuses people. They want order, but when is life ever perfectly ordered? I'd rather be good at dealing with uncertainty, dealing with life the way it is, not the way I think it ought to be. That's a skill. Being good at order doesn't require you to be good at anything. I wrote this in my journal. What is it that makes certain people want to drive when we all hate driving? What makes us want to drive far with no real destination? And forget financial fears, dangers of being on the road, weather conditions, loneliness, and boredom. Is it the sense of adventure? Is there a certain pulse, a heartbeat of the country that vibrates through all the open highways and interstates? Is it the sense that if and when you get back, everything will be different? I'm not sure. All I hear is the road telling me, let's go, let's go, let's go. I feel a rhythm in my bones coming from the road, and all I want to do is plug in. It's like a song I can't get out of my head. Let's see what I see. Part 7. There are 2 types of tape. Always have tape. I don't know why. I can't predict what for, but you'll need it. Duct tape is to hold your stuff together. Athletic tape is to hold you together. And sometimes they work interchangeably. Also body sprays for times you can't shower. It happens. And keep antiseptic wash and bandages in the car. You'll need it. And talk to strangers. To this day, I still make it a point, wherever I am, to nod and say hello. If a conversation strikes up, I go with it. The thing about being somewhere new is not just about being there, but about engaging with the people who live there. I used to be extremely shy, my social anxiety disorder. So this is also part of my daily practice, to get out of the habits that do not serve me, to not own my limitations, to each their own, to pick my preferences. It also creates a positive ripple. People feel good when they have a good experience. But to be frank, they're probably helping me more than I am them. People are my medication. With regards to training at a new martial arts school, be nice. Nicer than you've ever been. You've got no posse, no friends. You're on your own. Even if someone wrongs you, why would the school take your side? Someone they've known 15 minutes over someone they've known 15 years. If an experience sucks, cut your losses and leave. You have that freedom. I've talked to many wandering martial artists, and we've all had similar experiences. We love it, we'll keep doing it, but we must be cautious. Some places will see visitors as fresh meat. It's not like you could contact the school and ask, "Are you dangerous?" Who will say yes? You won't know until you get there and see the culture, and see how the instructors are, and see how they run their school. It starts from the top down. Look for signs and watch them spar before jumping in. Maybe even ask the instructor who's a safe person to train with. They'll understand, as many instructors have experience with training while traveling. When you do spar, don't try to win, try to learn. Why have ego over what is temporary? Don't fight for a turf you can't keep. Remember, you won't be there long. This is a good general rule. If you're in a new situation for a short period of time, that's just enough time to learn. Have your priorities straight. You can replace your stuff, but you can't replace you. And if you break, neither athletic tape nor duct tape will be able to put you back together again. Be open to new experiences, but not so open that your brain falls out. Travel with care. Traveling isn't about becoming the best. It's about the best experience and having the best life possible. Going places, making new friends, and seeing the world. So enjoy yourself and allow things to be. If, however, your primary goal is to get really good, you need a consistent and stable practice. For a long time, I didn't have anyone to promote me in rank. You'll have to live with that too. But that's what happens when you're a wanderer without a master. But in exchange, you get to be a wanderer without a master. That's not bad either. Part 8. Going viral. Before the popularity of Facebook and Twitter, I relied on a personal blog to write about my adventures. I also frequently updated my Yelp account, writing slices of life as reviews of places I had visited. And it somehow went viral. I still get asked if I'm that guy from that trip. During my journey, I started saying, "Have gi, we'll travel," a play off of the old 1960s TV show, "Have gun, we'll travel." Now it's the hashtag. People began to ask me to come visit them, so I did. There were even people online trying to guess where I might show up next. People even began offering me donations so that I could continue traveling and writing. This was all before GoFundMe and crowdsourcing. Strangers were invested in my trip, and some wanted me on the road indefinitely. Perhaps I was their escape. Part 9. Different ships, different nights. My body still gets warm when I think of all the random acts of kindness and generosity I received. Strangers invited me into their homes, invited me to dinner, introduced me to their friends and family when they barely knew me. Perhaps they thought they knew me. People began to project their own ideas onto me and my journey. I became a proxy for the life they wanted to live. I didn't mind. Most of the time, their explanations were a lot cooler than mine. But my own explanation was, I didn't know. So I wanted to find out. I wanted to see what I could see. It's the big world, and the parts I had already lived could have taken place on a soundstage. I had no idea how people truly lived, what people somewhere else were doing. Do they exist in the same moment I exist? I wanted to find out. The more I observed, the more it became real. If a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? I wanted to find out. Not just abstractly, but to know it in my bones. I wanted to be in as many forests as I could and see and hear for myself, to be a witness. I used to suffer from loneliness. Even when people were around, I felt lonely. I don't feel that anymore. Even when I'm alone, I still feel connected. I no longer need to physically see people to know I'm not alone. Being lonely with others is when you believe you are in this alone, or that no one cares about you, neither of which is true. What I learned from all this is that the world is full of good people. It's a kinder place than we think. Yes, there are bad people and evil exists, but it's not as common as the good. In fact, the media can't report on all the good things. You can't say nothing bad happened at this school today, or everything was good in this town today. It's too common, but bad things stand out, which is why it's reported. We think we know the world through media, but you don't really know until you get out there. And people are mostly good. And even if they're not, they want to be good. I feel like I'm proof of that. Most of the bad things in my life can't be blamed on people, even though I wish they could be. Most of the time, it was bad luck, bad timing, or circumstances beyond anyone's control. All the good things, however, were due to the deliberate actions of others. For this, I am grateful. There's a rich sadness in knowing most of the people I met in 2008. If we saw each other on the street, we wouldn't recognize each other. So much time has passed. And what we do remember are of our younger selves. A different look, a different role. Even if ships pass in the night again, it'll be different ships and a different night. Never the same river twice. But I hope if we do see each other again, there will be a spark of recognition where we'll simultaneously say, "You look familiar. Do I know you?" Part 10. The Turnaround. On a cold New York night, I came out of the subway terminal for Rockefeller Center and was greeted by bagpipe music. A parade. Bagpipes, kilts, uniforms, children, and people of importance. I don't know what the occasion was. To be frank, I wasn't even sure what day or month it was. I was out of it. Life was a blur. What I was doing was so incongruent from the way I used to live, my brain kept thinking I was dreaming. I was living a dream. Or was my past a dream? I was in conflict. Worlds were colliding. I walked for a while, and then I saw St. Patrick's Cathedral. For that moment, it was the most beautiful thing in my life. I went in and sat down. There was an event going on. There were families of organ donors who had passed away and the people whose lives were saved by them. When they all stood up, I saw the number of families affected, and it was quite moving. People coming together beyond race, creed, and beliefs for lives saved. I learned then, from suffering comes unity. I didn't know where I was or what I was doing. I knew where I was physically, but I didn't know where I was in existence. For that moment, I was lost. Or was I just lost in the moment? My soul was tired. I laid my head down on the pew. I thought about everything that led me there and why I took this trip. I wanted to be liberated. I thought if I had no attachments, I would finally be free. I then realized I had been free all along. The old Chinese curse, "May you live in interesting times," wasn't a curse at all. Not for me. To me, it's a blessing. I was free to make interesting choices, to make moments out of the ordinary. Then I woke up to find myself crying. Back then, I didn't know why, but I think I know now. I laid myself to rest at that church. All my old stories, who I thought I was supposed to be, it wasn't serving me. But I was fond of it, and I knew I couldn't go back to it. From now on, the people I knew would look different because I was different, and I could never see them the same way again. They would be the same. My city would be the same, but I wouldn't be. I was mourning the life I used to live because I couldn't pretend to be that person anymore. I didn't know how. In choosing to accept not knowing, I found peace. I got in my car and headed back to Los Angeles. Part 11. This is not a self-help guide. I'm not saying do it like me, or to do it at all. I'm just telling you what I did and how I felt when I did it. It's not easy. At times, your body, your spirit, and your bank account will be depleted. I had some savings and was fortunate enough to have so many people willing to help me. But you need more than that. You need stoic or Buddhist indifference and confidence. Indifference in the things that are outside your control, and confidence that you will land on your feet no matter what. And if you don't land on your feet, the indifference to be okay with that. When I took my trip, I wasn't hoping for the best. I was open to anything, not just the good things. That means falling flat on my face. I made peace with being broke, getting hurt, being embarrassed, and even dying. You can do things while being completely positive, but that seems like another form of slavery. I was open to all that was new, the good and the bad and the weird and the boring. Sure, I had my preferences, but I wasn't blind to the possibilities of what could occur on the road. What ought to be and what will be are not the same. And I wanted to plug into reality, not unplug because I didn't dare to enter the world with my eyes open. You're not leaping into the unknown if you think you already know everything that will happen, all of which are positives. Then you're just taking your roles and delusions wherever you go. From experience and as a martial artist, I promise you, if you see the world as you think it's supposed to be, predeterministic, rather than the way it is, you will get hurt, both physically and mentally. But if you leap with your eyes open, you will see the world in all its textured tapestry. This podcast is not meant to make people take off and fly. Those that will don't need the inspiration. They're the types that do these sorts of things anyway. It's who they are as individuals. If you want to do these things, it's not about motivating yourself to do something out of your character. It's about changing your character. Break out of your self-perceived role of who you should be and who you think you are. Get out from under the pressure of what you think you're used to and what you think you know and don't know. You don't know anything. And prepare to fall in love with thinking, with philosophy, because you're going to be spending a lot of time by yourself. And if you don't fall in love with it, you won't last. Or even worse, you'll lose your mind. All the driving and nights alone, I had a chance to think about everything, twice. It made me a better thinker. It gave me a philosophy to live by. I might not have been promoted in martial arts for a while, but through the road, I earned my black belt in critical thinking. But then again, I know a lot of people who spend as much time alone with their thoughts and got institutionalized. So, yeah, to each their own. You have the freedom to take risks. Part 12. Wanderlust. There's a bittersweet nostalgia to travel. You meet some people for only a day, sometimes only an hour. What remain are feelings, ghosts, imprints that people have left in you. That's part of it. Nothing will be permanent. You can't keep any experience, and you can't collect people. You have to be there when you're there, and then set it aside and move on. Some call this melancholia. The Japanese call this mono no oware, the understanding of impermanence. But I call it wanderlust. Anyone can go on a vacation, but to wander takes courage. For every hello, there are just as many goodbyes. It can be hard, but you can grow from it. Each beginning is a chance to adopt something new, and each ending is a chance to drop something old. As a wanderer, you often get to see people at their best. Meeting you allows them to break out of their routines, and you get a glimpse of who they were as children, curious and playful. And anyone can be on their best behavior for a short time. They will carry that memory with them, and you will be informed by everyone you meet. This gives you the opportunity to grow and curate the things you want to keep with you, to each their own. There are those who dislike new people, who are suspicious of them. I, however, never met them. This doesn't mean they do not exist. It's a matter of probability. I only met people who wanted to meet me. It's a natural filter. You either get good interactions or no interactions. Mostly. But as I said, anything can happen. So let's confront the elephant in the room. People have an allergy to boredom. But it's not like a peanut allergy. This one is 100% in your control. And I made peace with boredom. Rather than an allergy, I value it. It is the first and best resistance training in developing patience, mindfulness, and creativity. Boredom is invaluable. Part 13, Learning Compassion. Through these experiences, I got to develop an internal muscle that mostly gets ignored: compassion. We've all heard of empathy. All of us naturally have it, some more than others. Some will develop it more than others. But compassion is different. It's the ability to care about people, even in the absence of empathy. It's passion for others without expectations, judgments, or attachments. Stoic and Buddhist indifference. An EMT who is overly empathetic can't do her job. A compassionate EMT cares for people without having to suffer with them. She can continue her work and do more good. You can empathize with your high school friend who's in the hospital. Your brain, however, can't physically empathize with all the people in China. That amount of suffering would overload your brain. But it can feel compassion for them. I care about all the people I've met, but I have not attached myself to them. Otherwise, how could I keep saying goodbye and go to new places? Empathy can't care about someone you only knew for a few minutes, but you can have compassion for them. And if I became cold and sociopathic to avoid personal suffering, why would I care about meeting new people? To become a better person, I had to learn compassion. This opened me up to care about all people, even those I'll never know. I can't empathize with all of them, but I can honestly say I care. Compassion, like boredom, is uncommon advice. It's something you won't learn unless you do those things that are uncommon. Everyone wants empathy, but it's draining, and you can't help anyone if you're drained. Compassion is your shield. Being overly empathetic leads to codependence. Compassion might not be what the other person wants, but it's usually what both of you need. Any robot can be polite, but only a human being can be kind. Sometimes kindness means not being polite and not giving people what they want, but rather what they need. Compassion is love, and love knows when to be tough. Politics and media love empathy. They want you to take everything personally, to care about one over the many, to suffer for ratings. Buddhists and Stoics value compassion. Don't act or care because you are personally suffering. Act and care because it is the right thing to do. Otherwise, you won't act when you don't feel the suffering of others. And that's the majority of problems out there. When I worked as a loan officer, there were a handful of people I really helped, where I wasn't motivated by commission. I used those anecdotal stories to prove to myself I was doing a good deed. Look at Mrs. Hernandez. I helped her. This allowed me to ignore all the other people I didn't help. I shut off my compassion for the many and spotlighted my bias for the few. This is how it works. You show how a program helped one person and you ignore all the other people it hurt. Or the opposite. Show how it hurt one person and ignore all the other people it helped. We all have empathy, just as we all have binary thinking. But most of us lack compassion, just as we lack granular thinking. Empathy is important. It's why we have it. But it's an old part of our brain designed for more personal situations. It's tribal and not equipped for broad swaths of people. In this interconnected global world, the modern instinct has to be compassion. Not just meeting a new person on occasion, but meeting whole new groups consistently has taught me that I need more than empathy. With empathy, it's too easy to use your energy and resources ineffectively because your knee-jerk reaction compels you to. It's better to channel that energy to where your resources can best be used while maintaining your staying power. Empathy, like willpower, diminishes over time. Compassion doesn't. Part 14. Fast forward. So where am I now? I never did end up getting a real job, and my writing has evolved into a podcast, and I'm still helping people the best I can, and that sometimes means reining in misplaced empathy. I'm still trying to be a better person, and still growing my compassion. And my old company, it used to be in the Fortune 100. Then it went bankrupt during the financial crisis. I lost my retirement and my company stocks. When I left on my trip, I still had a nest egg to return to, my safety net. And towards the end of my trip, I was financially ruined. I was flying without a net. I remember the moment I found out my savings was gone. I was in a motel in the middle of Kansas watching the news. The anchor said my former employers no longer existed. I didn't know that was even possible. But to me, all I know about what's possible is all I've learned in my short lifetime. This is why hearing the experiences of others is so valuable. You get to learn from the experiences of different lives and different lifetimes. Now I know. I went for a walk. I walked for a long time. There were no people, no cars, just endless fields. I wrote this in my journal. Do your best, even on your worst day. When I got back to my motel, I was over it. This wasn't the first time I lost a large sum of money, and it wouldn't be my last. When you live the life you want, shit happens. But shit happens even when you live the life you don't want. If I didn't leave the company when I did, it would have been even worse for me. It ruined the lives of many of my former coworkers. That's the thing. There is no safe path. It's almost spooky. I took my trip in early 2008, and by that fall, the economy collapsed and my old employers were gone. I felt like an islander who was sick of their island and left right before the volcano erupted, or rather, before the bubble erupted. Sure, I got burned by some falling debris, but I avoided the brunt of it. In leaping with eyes open into the unknown, I avoided the danger at home. Part 15. Confidence in my skills. One of the things my father told me when I was on my travels was that no matter where I am or what happens, I'll be alright. It's about the nicest thing he's ever said to me. It wasn't a big thing, but it gave me confidence. It still gives me confidence because it's true. I'm always alright, even when everything else isn't. My confidence doesn't come from motivation or inspiration. It comes from the knowledge and skills I've accumulated. And that comes from living a life worth living. If my father had told me I was special, the outcome would have been different. But he always put the emphasis on what was in my control, my skills. Like the original intent of Kung Fu, if you are highly skilled through perseverance, you need no other goals or plans. You'll be all right. Before my journey, I wasn't close to my family. But my experiences on the road changed all that. It also prepared me for all the unknowns. Not long after my trip, my sister died. Then my father. Then my mother. But, fortunately, I grew close to them before the end. I was able to spend a lot of time with them, which wasn't possible before because they lived in another state and I was working all the time. But now, I could be anywhere for as long as I wanted. So I stayed with them. My mom thanked me for being the rock my family needed. I couldn't have done that before. When my mother fell ill, I moved her in with me so that I could take care of her. It was hard to watch my family suffer, and harder to see my mom suffer every day as her main caregiver. I was drained. Other family members shut down. They couldn't help, which came off selfish and cold-hearted. But their hearts couldn't bear it. They were suffering with her. Their empathy was beyond their resilience. You will see this when someone dies in a family. The most caring people might shut down, and the person you least expect might pick up the slack. I wasn't able to carry my mom and help her use the bathroom when I was sleep deprived and exhausted because I felt her pain. I did it because it was the right thing to do, because I cared about her. I had the right qualities to help her, qualities I didn't have a few years prior. Many unpredictable things happened and continue to happen. I had more people close to me die, all of them too quickly. My father-in-law died in a work accident a month after my mom passed. Another childhood friend died not too long after that. I was never ready for it. I know for certain that it would have broken the person I was before my journey. But without compassion, I wouldn't have been able to bond with my family, say hello, or say goodbye to them. Compassion is love, and love means letting go. Without a resilient sense of happiness, I wouldn't be able to talk about this. I came full circle. I left home to finally find home. My time on the road taught me the skills I needed for everything that would happen after. I don't regret what is done, but I know how to cherish the good that has happened. The sadness for people I have lost is intertwined with my feelings of gratitude for them. I can bear it because I know a deep emotional life also includes sadness. Miyamoto Musashi said, "The true science of martial arts means practicing them in such a way that they will be useful at any time, and to teach them in such a way that they will be useful in all things." End quote. Because of my experience, to honor all the people who have helped me along the way, I will spend the rest of my life teaching people how skills on the mat transfer to all things. Part 16, Now and Beyond. I don't have tourist stories, and I don't know how you're supposed to travel. Since 2008, I travel only to meet people, to truly connect. Since my nationwide trip, I've been to Europe, Asia, South America, and even New Zealand. I've stayed in people's garages, been given penthouse suites, crashed on couches in hostels, and even in rustic cottages with families I had just met. On my adventures, I've been the only non-family member in multi-generational European family dinners. I've given talks in front of strangers, been given tours by academics, trained in small remote schools, and got to play in kids' martial arts classes. Small or big, paid or out of my own pocket, I've enjoyed them all. I consider martial arts a universal language. I'm interested in all the different ways it can be spoken, and all the ways it can be expressed, not only in movement, but in principle, in culture, in method, and in philosophy. The days of exploration are still not over. Life is an adventure, and adventure means to venture forth. None of this would have happened if I hadn't one day decided to choose something different from my default set of behaviors, to look at my life and think better of it, to choose my own preferences and see where it led. And not knowing where it would lead, being open-ended and without goals, is how I ended up living a life far better than anything I could have planned. When I removed everything I thought I knew, is when I found a life worth living and liberation in life. Part 17, Epilogue. The best part of my adventure. In a small town in East Texas, I met the woman who became my wife. When you don't know where you're going to end up, is the only way you'll be in a situation to meet the love of your life you were never supposed to meet. To each their own.